When an experienced photographer of nature saw a grizzly bear attempting he anticipated documenting the snow in Alaska. The brutal reality of nature, instead, he saw an incident that would cause the fundamental basis of wildlife science. What transpired next between the enormous ape predator and a moose calf that was stranded didn't simply disregard your natural instincts. Questioned everything we believe to be true regarding the consciousness of animals. This remarkable interaction in the film Frozen, a worldwide revolution, was spurred by wilderness. In our comprehension of wildlife behavior, changes in behavior that go beyond scientific investigation, but our whole connection to the natural world, bears unfeasible decision was modified, everything demonstrating that occasionally the most important discoveries are not made by experiments or labs, but from those seldom times when nature discloses the thermometer read her deepest secrets. -30 degrees when Thomas emerged from his breath froze in the cabin that morning. Immediately in the air, producing tiny clouds that move in front of his eyes like 20 years of experience as a wildlife researcher expertise, researching the behavior of animals, and he believed he had the wilderness of Alaska. Seen all that was visible. He was incorrect. The sun had just started to rise, painting the snow over the horizon purple-hued landscape, and Gold Thomas made adjustments to his heavy camera apparatus and examined his one final time using a satellite phone before advancing farther into the white space. He had heard of strange animals' activity in the region. Something that ought not to have occurred during the crunch of his boots in the dead of winter produced the sole sound in the newly fallen snow. Even the wind seemed to hold for miles. The eerie stillness created by its breath that caused his hair to stand on end. Something felt odd when the neck stood up. Around this morning, there was the weight of expectation, as though nature itself was aware that something remarkable was about to happen. And he first noticed the tracks, and they were huge tracks. The size of each print exceeded his gloved hand. Thomas's heart started pounding, because this was bears should be deep in the impossible hibernation throughout the year at this period. He had written each and every scientific paper. Research that he had carried out verified this fundamental fact. But here where there couldn't be more than a few fresh tracks. Hours old. Entering the thick woodland, Thomas lifted his camera in front of him and started recording the tracks while his mind raced. Was this bear ill? Hurt? What might be the cause? Winter slumber in all of his years of research that he had never come across, he had no idea what this was like. He would follow these trails to a finding that would pose a challenge. Everything he believed to be true behavior of wildlife, the footprints, took him closer to the trees in the forest, became so dense that they nearly obscured the silence, deepened in the morning light. Heavier with every stride, interrupted only by occasionally, a frozen branch will crack. The scientific intellect of Thomas started recording each and every aspect, potential justification for his observing. Yet nothing in his vast experience might have equipped him for a sound halted what he was about to view. The fearsome roar did not stop him in his tracks. He may have anticipated something, but otherwise completely something that made him wonder if his ears were playing pranks on him. It sounded nearly as if Thomas lifted his camera in tears. Fingers quivering a little in spite of as the tracks LED around a pair of thick gloves, enormous pine tree, and while he cautiously examined the scene in front of him, caused him to forget everything scientific method he had ever acquired for his camera, almost fell out of his hands as he had trouble understanding what he was observing. In a tiny clearing there in front of him was the biggest grizzly bear he saw. But it wasn't the bear's size that caused Thomas to gasp for air. The bear was what was in his neck. Everything would change if he did that. Believed he was aware of this amazing animals, that the enormous grizzly was close to clouds formed by the breath of a frozen pond in the icy atmosphere. Thomas had captured images of hundreds of bears over the course of his career, but something regarding the behavior of this one appeared essentially distinct rather than he anticipated: an aggressive, hungry stance. From a bear that woke up in the cold, one moved with deliberate caution. Motions of its strong paws, each having claws that could readily rip through the thick hide and work with unexpected tenderness, At something in the Thomas's telescopic lens capturing Snow watched the bear, with increasing awe, was concentrating hard on what seemed to be a shadowy figure partially covered in snow. Wonder as the intensity of the morning light increased at last. Thomas could see what had almost attracted the bear's attention there. Unnoticeable amid the white surroundings laid a moose calf that was too young to have probably been older than a couple months. Separated from its mother throughout the Thomas's violent storm from last night, he steadied his camera with shaking hands. All he was aware of was behavior, advised him to get ready for what was coming. He has recorded prey for predators. Exchanges many times prior to, and a defenseless calf would be a simple dinner. For a bear in winter that is hungry, his over-the-shutter button, a finger glided. Prepared to depict the stark realities of nature, however, what followed would permanently alter his perception of wildlife. The bear started acting cautiously, removing the snow off the calf's motions that appeared to be so soft and impossible for a predator with that kind of power. Every movement of its enormous paw was calculating, exact, and nearly surgical, and Thomas could scarcely believe its care. What he could see was the bear, using the viewfinder, placed its weight to protect the calf from the wind that whipped furiously through the trees. The temperature had fell far below zero overnight, and the calf displayed very little symptoms of life. Yet the bear continued to endeavors to save lives by using its own body heat to reheat Thomas. The partially frozen monster was shocked to see that the bear even stimulated circulation with its tongue in the limbs of the calf, similar to a mother using her own cub's minutes. Bear would lasted about an hour, as Thomas recorded each and every remarkable moment. The cold had made his fingertips numb, yet he was hardly aware that the young moose had started displaying additional indications of life beneath the initially bear's patient care. Its ears, followed by more powerful motions of its head. The bear stayed composed and consistent in its endeavors, on occasion producing low, rumbling noises that were transported clearly. The morning air was still. Thomas's thoughts were racing with the consequences of what he was seeing. This wasn't merely odd conduct. It was revolutionary in all that he had discovered about connections between predators and prey. Everything that is written in scientific books about naked behavior were being challenged by the previous events. He made this deliberate decision, and it was empathy. This was something that would force science to reconsider its whole comprehension of the consciousness of animals. After almost 2 hours of attention, the bear's efforts started to yield tangible results. The calf then succeeded in raising its head, found it difficult to curl its legs under itself. The bear paid close attention, providing occasional mild prods of encouragement through its nose. When at last, the calf tried to stand, Thomas felt his cheeks freeze with tears. Never saw anything so amazing over his years of wildlife studies. Yet nature had another surprise in store for Riz. A sound reverberated through the trees. Something caused the bear and Thomas to pause. The characteristic cry of a female moose looking for the calf. She lost. Thomas anticipated the bear to run away, or maybe even display instead. He saw hostility. Something even more remarkable, that the bear gradually moved away from the calf, establishing a purposeful distance between them. Its actions demonstrated a definite goal and comprehension of the circumstances that talked about information that was much above what science had given these creatures. As seen by Thomas, recorded each amazing event as from the tree line, the mother moose appeared. The minutes that followed went by like in a meticulously planned dance. The mother, the moose, approached warily. Divided between bear phobia and maternal instinct, the bear kept its distance, with its head lowered in what seemed to be in a position of submission. It was interspecies communication that defies every accepted interpretation of behavior of wildlife. Thomas's camera, the shutter clicked quickly as he recorded the mother moose arrive for the gathering. Calf, who was able to remain upright on legs, trembling as the two linked. The bear stayed close by, observing. With what all Thomas could say was that he was apparent contentment just after the calf successfully started nursing the bear. turn at last and strolled gently back into the forest footprints in the snow that would result in an entire rethinking what we believe to be true about wildlife, and the return trip to his Thomas's hands felt unreal in the cabin. Still trembled as he cautiously put away his camera gear, being aware that he carried proof of anything that might contest the fundamental tenets of science of wildlife. The bear's footprints in the snow had already started to melt. However, the effect of what he had seen will quickly extend well beyond as frozen the wilderness where Thomas spent that night hours looking over each of his photos. An amazing story was partially told by the image. Picture after picture demonstrated the bear's careful handling of the moose CAF. He meticulously recorded everything. As the writing was still fresh in memory, thorough observations of the bear's behavior, its nonverbal cues, and each tiny gesture that conveyed awareness. He had trouble making decisions while sleeping. Night. His thoughts kept going back to the bear's initial approach to the calf based on his knowledge of regarding all aspects of predator behavior published in scientific journals and textbook journals. What he had seen ought to bears were thought to have been impossible. To be motivated by instinct by the straightforward equations for survival and hunger. But this bear has displayed more anything suggesting a depth of the awareness that science had not before recognized in these animals. The following Thomas placed his first call in the morning to Sarah Henderson, a physician at the Wildlife Behavior Institute. Her first doubt gave way to stunned quiet as he sent me a description of what he had seen. Everything she said, and at last, her voice, every picture, makes me shiver with eagerness. Each note has the potential to alter our whole comprehension of the predator behavior. Within a few days of Thomas's, findings started making a splash in the scientific researchers from the community who had spent after decades of researching bears. They discovered challenging ingrained notions. The images that circulate among academic circles with contentious discussions on the consciousness of animals and the consequences for the study of wildlife included in the first significant conference. Call 3 continents worth of wildlife specialist Thomas walked while sharing his screen. Them via the series of events that typical academic discipline was replaced by unrestrained enthusiasm. These were scientists whose careers had been based on the presumption that big predators were active just following their instincts. They were now seeing evidence that pointed to something far more intricate. Local wildlife officials started to report comparable findings. It appeared from other regions that once people were aware of what to search for, began looking for further instances of unexpected actions by predatory species. There have been reports of a wolf pack in Montana. Leading hikers who were lost back to a trail at California's mountain range had been seen giving its kill to a ravenous coyote. But none of these problems correspond to the unambiguous documentation of after Thomas's naked encounter. They recommended a recurring theme that has been overlooked for generations. Conservation group arrested when the bear's story was discovered, and the moose calf developed into a strong emblem, befitting their purpose if these animals are able to show such empathy. They debated how to keep treating them as helpless animals that provide programs to safeguard animals increased as people started observing big predators in a fresh light. The media's focus increased initially. It was merely scientific. Journals and periodicals about nature. Then mainstream media began to report on the tale. Thomas ended up writing interviews that thoroughly clarify what he had observed and the potential implications for our knowledge of wildlife. He was resolved to provide the information without using sensationalism to excuse the bear's behavior. Universities started to talk for themselves. Revising their biology of wildlife, the incident turned into a case in the curriculum. Studying classes on animal behavior, pupils who had already committed basic patterns of sensory response in predators, currently having intricate conversations regarding emotional animal consciousness capacity. The snow-covered bear had turned into a spark for a fresh perspective on the priority for wildlife research changed. New research was started to examine cognitive capacities in a broad. Scientists studying predators started creating more advanced methods of observation and record the behavior of animals in the wild. Grant applications that could have been written off as being too speculative be given careful thought. That the scientific community was starting to acknowledge that there was still a lot to learn. regarding the emotion and intelligence of animals. Thomas was positioned in the middle of this silent revolution in wildlife science. But the most profound to him, every time he went, the alteration was personal. He now entered the area and observed the animals in a unique way for each bear he captured on camera. Each predator he pursued stopped merely a research topic, but a possible window into the animal kingdom. Awareness that people were only starting to comprehend the original bear's identity was never confirmed. Despite intensive monitoring methods, it appeared to have disappeared once more into the enormous wilderness in Alaska. But in a sense, this increased the story's impact. Bear hadn't done anything to earn human approval. Alternatively, it had taken a decision that went against all the instincts that science possessed due to its species, and in doing so, consequently, it altered how people would see 5 years later wildlife forever. On that fateful morning, Thomas stood in the snow. Prior to a crowded audience at the Worldwide Summit on Wildlife Conservation, as he ready to share his most recent findings, he considered the impact that one bear's actions had changed not only his life, but also the whole wildlife science discipline. The changes started out slowly, then acquired unstoppable speed. Inside months spent with Discovery Wildlife, North American agencies had redesigned their predator entirely management procedures. The traditional method of considering big predators to be straightforward threats to be subdued were replaced by more complex regulations that acknowledged their intricate emotional behaviors. Ability. Thomas's professional life had experienced a total change in his research at this time, centered on recording instances of predators' conscious decision-making species using novel methods of observation. His team's innovative camera systems gathered hundreds of examples of unexpected cooperation between distinct species with every new discovery. An additional component to the expanding picture of animal consciousness that presented difficulties, conventional scientific presumptions that the biggest alterations occurred in government laws protecting wildlife globally. People started spreading what became referred to as acts of consciousness recognition. These statutes recognize that significant predators have intricate emotional and cognitive skills that merit extra attention. Protection sanctions for poaching significantly expanded habitat protection, even extended the language utilized in documents pertaining to wildlife management. Substituted words such as specimens on topics using terminology that are acknowledged. Public perception of animals as sentient entities changes in attitude demonstrated. Even more extraordinary individuals who had previously provided programs for predator control have now evolved into supporters of communities that coexist close to wildlife areas. New methods for coexisting with predators. They developed educational initiatives that taught kids about animals' emotional intelligence and awareness. The actions of visitors in national parks changed when viewers started to viewing wildlife with reverence instead than merely being curious or afraid. The scientific repercussions extended much beyond. Neurologists studying wildlife biology began investigating the brain characteristics of animals and new methods for detecting signs of emotional processing and behavioral decision-making. Researchers created groundbreaking hypotheses regarding the development of philosophers of consciousness. Participated in contentious discussions on the nature of non-human intelligence and emotion. Species that the bear's behavior had provoked inquiries that questioned the fundamentals of how people stood their position in the preservation of the natural world. Efforts saw an unparalleled increase in public backing and financed. The tale of the moose calf and the bear became a representation of the hidden complexity. Documentarians created acclaimed films about comparable instances of interspecies collaboration, each fresh example being reaffirmed the message that people hardly had only touched the surface of comprehension. Universities that study animal behavior established brand new research divisions committed to researching animals. Young scientists are drawn to consciousness. These programs are keen to investigate this groundbreaking field. For the following generation of wildlife scientists went to there operate with new perspectives, liberated from the limitations of outdated presumptions regarding animal behavior. Possibly the most unexpectedly, the finding influences domains distant from the study of animal biology. Researchers studying artificial intelligence started researching how animals make decisions, procedures to create increasingly complex medical researchers investigated AI systems, novel methods for comprehending empathy and the processing of emotions. Even in business, the B story was first used in schools to impart knowledge about difficult prevailing paradigms and the significance of Thomas's original observation. Millions of people had viewed the photos, exhibited at museums, and researched in schools across the globe. But more crucially, they had opened innumerable eyes to the potential of science. Children who had been discarded now grew growing up knowing that the environment was much more beautiful and complex. More than anybody had thought of. The bear itself was never seen again. Even after many attempts to locate and track it, as of yet its legacy persisted, and each new animal consciousness was discovered in each updated wildlife protection law and any changed viewpoint on the connection between nature and humanity. That one deed of kindness in the snow had caused a domino effect of knowledge that kept growing. Thomas was getting ready to present his most recent conclusions with the attendees summit. He considered how appropriate that a moment of silence in the Alaskan "everything has changed" in wilderness. Bear had demonstrated that the natural environment still had mysteries that it has transformed human comprehension. Demonstrated that occasionally the most impactful scientific advancements were not made by intricate tests or sophisticated technology, but just by being there to see the unforeseen shifts continuing to develop. Each year brought fresh insights regarding animals. Each study of consciousness and behavior deepened the awareness of humanity of their untamed neighbors. Early that day in snow had not only altered human behavior, thought of bears or predators. It had evolved how they perceived the opening of life, their eyes to the potentiality that compassion and awareness were present in forms they never would have thought of 10 years ago. Following his discovery, Thomas discovered in the Alaskan wilderness, once more the scenery was blanketed in snow as it had that life-changing morning, and he had his camera ready by his side. But he wasn't by himself this time. A bunch of young researchers studying wildlife were accompanied by. He is keen to absorb knowledge from the man whose their field has changed due to discovery. As they tracked new, naked footprints in the Thomas told the tale of snow that had altered all. That the pupils heard carefully, their state-of-the-art research apparatus, much more sophisticated than what he had previously used 10 years ago. Their gadgets could find and examine patterns in the brains of animals, emotional reactions in the wild measure, and record intricate social encounters. With all of this, technologies existed as a result of one bear displaying the world that animals could inhabit. So far more than they had anticipated. The Thomas's most satisfying modification was observing how kids are currently taught about the simple predator had replaced the wildlife. He has researched prey dynamics, and his young pupils have now studied animals, feelings, interspecies collaboration, and the complex network of awareness that linked the bears with all living creatures. An act of kindness had created an opportunity that couldn't be closed, resulting in a greater comprehension of the nature globally. Recent research has shown countless instances of conscious wildlife. Bears' decision-making process had been seen fishing in the same areas as during salmon runs. Wolves and lions have been observed shielding wounded zebras from every new discovery made by other predators. Confirmed what Thomas had seen: nature did not function on that snowy morning only on survival and instinct, but on decisions that occasionally defy straightforward. Thomas's scientific paper explanation still had written about his discovery, the most referenced piece of contemporary wildlife biology, but more significantly, it had motivated a generation of scholars to challenge their presumptions and take a look at further exploration of animal mysteries. Awareness. His pictures hung in museums worldwide that serve as a reminder viewers that even the most untamed animals were able to exhibit unexpected tenderness. As Thomas and his pupils established their familiar sound from observation equipment, a bear's voice reverberated across the trees. A thunderous cry echoed through the snow. The pupils fell in the blanketed terrain, their instruments recording each one in silence. Specifics. Thomas lifted his camera as he had prepared to do so 10 years prior. Record any upcoming new discoveries. That morning's legacy in the snow persisted not just in scientific documents and policy modifications, but how people's perception of their role in the natural one bears the decision to assist another in the world. The creature had made a startling revelation. Showed compassion was not species-specific. Consciousness permeated everything. Living creatures in ways that were exclusive to humans, starting to realize that everything had the world was richer, and the world did change. Because it's like a bear's unanticipated generosity altered everything. Each tale has the ability to change the way we perceive the world. Participate in our expanding narrative YouTube community by signing up for Story That Changes. Click subscribe, and to receive weekly updates, click the notification bell. Tales that contradict our preconceived notions. Be aware of the remarkable times in life.